friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Katie. This is Life Between Words. To start, a little housekeeping? I don't know. In my last video, you know that my whole family has been struck down by the stomach bug. We are doing a lot better. We're not completely better yet, but as you can see, it's rather late in the day and everyone is napping except for me. I am quickly going to do a little haul. I am not going to show you all the books that I've gotten since my last haul, which I'm pretty sure was like late spring, and I have gotten a lot of books since then because, you know, book outlet, my birthday, my trip with my booktube friends, and some various excursions to the used bookstore. So needless to say, I've acquired many books. Instead of showing you everything, I decided to break up my book haul into themes, which I will be doing over the next few months. So today, I have a very Hollywood book haul for you. Around my birthday, I became fascinated with early Hollywood. So let's get down to business and learn about some old Hollywood it girls that I've become fascinated with and want to learn more about. I'm going to start with literally the first it girl, and that was Clara Bow. This book is called Clara Bow, Runnin' Wild. And Clara Bow was a silent film actress that didn't transition well into talking films. Some people say that it was because she had a very strong Brooklyn accent, but I actually just finished this book and I think that there were a lot of factors that led to her not transitioning well, but the biggest of which is the fact that the studio, Paramount, that she was contracted under just treated her really, really miserably. I think a theme that runs throughout a lot of old Hollywood film actresses, and maybe actors too, but a lot of actresses, the studio basically had control of their entire lives. That goes beyond their professional lives to their personal lives, and that is partly what got Clara Bow into so much trouble, because she was very free-spirited and led a very free-spirited life. She kind of epitomized the flapper lifestyle anyway, and so she faded into obscurity, and what's really sad about that is she was an incredibly, incredibly naturally talented actress. It was Clara Bow who coined the term the it girl, or rather it was someone involved in Clara Bow's life who coined the term on her behalf. Most people have never even heard of her. In fact, most of her silent films have not survived because a lot of silent films weren't taken care of by the studios, and so they have disintegrated and disappeared. Immediately following Clara Bow's footsteps was Jean Harlow, and Jean Harlow, this is also, so Clara Bow was written by David Sten, and this was also written by David Sten, and Jean Harlow was the original blonde bombshell. So she is who Marilyn Monroe styled herself after. She was one of the first talking film stars. Jean Harlow's Hollywood career was cut short mostly because she died very young. I think she was like 26 years old when she died. Like any Hollywood death in which the star dies young, there was a lot of conspiracy surrounding her death and a lot of confusion about what she died from. She also led a really interesting life that was not without its own scandal. Also, I think that one of the really interesting thing about both of these actresses is that they were known in Hollywood as just being really kind-hearted. Along with the studios who controlled Jean's life, her mother also controlled Jean's life, and even as a 20-something, her mom and everyone else around her called her baby, which is just kind of sad. You'll notice a trend here because almost all of these actresses led just really, really tragic lives. The next on the list is Judy Garland. This is Get Happy by Gerald Clark, another actress whose life was completely controlled by the studios. Something that was very common in early Hollywood was that a lot of doctors would prescribe sleeping pills to help actresses sleep in the few hours that they had, and then they'd give them uppers to keep them awake when they had to go to the studio early, and so they'd get hooked on drugs, and that was something that happened with Judy Garland. She just led such a tragic life of complete studio control, and studios were never happy. It was all about presentation. This biography follows Judy from her early life to her tragic last days, which were very tragic. I first heard about this book, I think, from Leslie over at Words of a Reader, and I've wanted to read this book ever since. Next, the blonde bombshell that at least I am the most familiar with, and I think probably the rest of the world is most familiar with, which is really unfortunate because Jean Harlow was the original blonde bombshell, but maybe unfortunate is the wrong word. Anyway, Marilyn Monroe. This is The Secret Life of Marilyn Monroe by J. Randy Tara Borelli. I did a lot of research about the best biographies for all of these actresses. With Clara Bow and Jean Harlow, there actually weren't very many biographies. Marilyn Monroe, there were a lot, but this is the one that I landed on. I think that what sets this biography apart as opposed to other biographies is that this biographer really takes time exploring the relationship that Norma Jean or Marilyn Monroe had with her mother, whereas before kind of everyone assumed that Marilyn Monroe cut ties with her family. That wasn't actually the case. And so this biographer has really done his research to uncover the true relationship between Marilyn Monroe and her mother, and probably the true relationship between Marilyn Monroe and many other people. Marilyn Monroe has always kind of fascinated me. I grew up watching and loving Some Like It Hot. It's one of my very, very all-time favorite comedies. After growing up watching it, you come to understand that Marilyn was very tortured, very lonely, very insecure, and she was really descending quickly by the time Some Like It Hot happened. And so, you know, she could never remember her lines. She was always showing up late to set, and they had to actually like post her lines on secretly on things. Even though Clara Bow was a recluse by the time she was in later life and Marilyn Monroe came onto the scene, when Marilyn Monroe died, Clara Bow said something like, being a sex symbol is a heavy burden to bear when you're lonely and afraid, or something like that. And it was just very, very telling. And so anyway, I'm really looking forward to reading this. Because I just mentioned Marilyn Monroe's biography that I'm going to read, I will mention the fiction book that I got pertaining to Marilyn Monroe, and that is Blonde by Joyce Carol Oates. I've never read Joyce Carol Oates. I have a feeling that this is very literary, and it's also like 700 plus pages, so I'm a little actually intimidated by this because I don't know how readable it is. I will get back to you on that once I read it. I don't actually know much about the book, other than I'm very interested in reading it. I definitely am going to read it after the biography because I really want to know where Joyce Carol Oates decides to fictionalize Marilyn Monroe's life and what she chooses to highlight and what she chooses to exaggerate, what she chooses to minimize, those kinds of things. So I'm not going to read this until after I read more about Marilyn Monroe's real life. I also at some point may want to pick up Marilyn Monroe's autobiography. I don't actually know much about it. I just know that she wrote one. The last nonfiction book I have to talk about is a book called The Star Machine by Janine Basinger. The reason that this book really piqued my interest is that a common thread between all of these lives is, like I've already mentioned, the control that movie studios had over the lives of their actors and actresses. They saw them less as people and more as commodities, and that was really, really true in the Clara Bow biography. I mean, it was horrendous the way she was treated. My blood was boiling throughout most of that book when it came to scenes where it was talking about studio heads who were discussing her and her career trajectory and her as a person, and literally talking about her as if she were something to be used up and thrown aside. And it was just so angering, and that could not have been just a one-off. I have a feeling that most actresses at the time were controlled to a certain extent, and I've heard stories of like forced abortions, and a lot of the forced abortions were because movie studios wanted their actresses to be seen as pure. I've also heard about couples who were forced to divorce. It was just crazy making. And so anyway, I really want to read this book. I think that this book might be a little bit more lighthearted than that. That is just like the really, really dark side of Hollywood. This might delve into some of the dark side of Hollywood, but I think it also just talks about the star machine and how Hollywood manufactured stars and why we will probably never see stars the same way. Like, we will never have a star like Marilyn Monroe again because celebrity was different then. The amount of fame that they had just doesn't exist anymore. People's tastes, people's preferences are a lot more niche. Everything is so spread out. That's all to say that this book focuses on the star machine, like how studios manufactured and promoted their stars to reach that level of fame. And I think that it focuses on a few stars in particular, like, what does it say, Tyrone Power, Lana Turner, and a dazzling cast of others. I've heard that it's very entertaining, I've heard that it's very engaging, and I'm really looking forward to reading it. Last book to round out this collection of Hollywood tomes is another fiction book, recent release, called The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I have been wanting to read this book all year, you guys. I read one other Taylor Jenkins Reid book this summer/fall, I don't even remember what month it was in, and I loved it. I thought it was great. This book, I've heard, is completely different from her other books, but like her other books, a page turner, and I'm really excited to read it because it's sort of a fictionalized account of an it girl along the lines of a Clara Bow or a Jean Harlow or a Marilyn Monroe. It's about an it girl who decides to divulge all her life's secrets to a reporter, and it's very juicy and page-turning. This is a book that has been on my radar for a long time. I really want to read it, and I think that it will be a great addition to all of these other Hollywood books. I also have another book that I got on my Kindle about Carole Lombard, who was famous in her own right, but was also the wife of Clark Gable, who was a childhood crush of mine, and I think many other people who were introduced to old Hollywood films when they were young, because Clark Gable was very handsome. He was the leading actor in, gosh, what was the movie? Scarlett O'Hara. Gone with the Wind. He was the lead in Gone with the Wind, but he was also in some other romantic comedies that are some of my favorite movies, which I can talk about at another time if you would like. I can talk about some of my favorite old Hollywood films. That would be a fun video to do, but completely unbookish. Anyway, yes, I've got a book about Carole Lombard on my Kindle. Carole Lombard died tragically in a plane crash that actually was mentioned in Clara Bow because Clara Bow saw the plane crash from her house. She and her husband left Hollywood and ran a ranch, and they saw the after effect. They didn't actually see the plane crash, but they saw like the smoke from it and didn't know what was going on, and her husband went and investigated with a bunch of other people, and they found that that was the plane that crashed with Carole Lombard. These lives of the rich and famous and the stars, they all connect. It's just so fascinating. I am completely absorbed with Hollywood right now. Can't wait to learn more. Thank you all for joining me on this little tour of my recent mini obsession about early Hollywood. I know, it's quite bizarre. Let me know if you've got other books about Hollywood that you think I should add to this list that are worth reading. I hope you guys are all having a great day. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content, and I will talk to you all later. Bye! Hi, lovey. Hi, lovey. I think you should have napped a little longer, although that wasn't a bad nap. He's really, really fuzzy. Gotta move him back more. There. Kiss?
Here, I can't hold it. You want to snuggle?
You want to snuggle?
Oh, he's fast asleep.
Yeah. Slept again. You want Daddy? Do you want to talk about your thing?
This is Christmas.
What is it?
Christmas.
It's constructions?
Yeah.
Do you have toothpaste on your face?
No.
What's that?
There's a little bit of crust.
A little bit of crust. I think it's toothpaste crust.
Yeah. Come and get that. Look at my scratchy things.
What are your fingers? Your scratchy things. Your nails?
Yeah, that's how we get them off. With our nails. I want so much fun with my dog.
Okay, sit down.
Doggy!
Please don't touch that.
But Doggy was just licking it.
I know, but I don't want the camera to move. Okay?
You don't?
No.
It's just a pretend.
Oh, okay.
Mom, I'm going to leave.
Okay.
This one. Come on.
Thank you. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah. I don't know.
What does that look like?
A line?
Yeah.
talking about God?
Are we talking about God? We could. Do you want to talk about God?
Yeah.
What do you want to say?
On the camera.
What do you want to say about God on the camera?
God is in here.
God is in the camera?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
You
Well,
see?
God is everywhere, so maybe he is inside the camera.
Maybe. There's eye. There might be an eye in there. I see one.
You see one eye.
Yeah.
All right, come back here, honey. All right, that's enough. All right, everyone. We'll be back. We'll come back later for another video. Bye.
I'm going to turn this around. Okay, turn this around.